Would you believe that on one CV that I looked at, there was a sentence that read "clam under pressure," and another wrote that they worked in cod storage? Definitely something fishy going on here. Now, the advice that I'm going to give you is based on 10 years of experience helping people with their CVs. So the information that's contained in this video will help you write an excellent CV. But before we get started, there are 2 key points that I want to make. 1, if you're getting professional help, ensure that you play a key part in the actual process. 2, the professional supporting you should be able to explain the logic behind the advice that they're giving, and that's what's going to happen in this video. So let's start with the flow of the CV, and just so you're aware, there are timestamps below so that you can zip straight to a particular area relevant to you. So to start with, we've got the personal details. This is so that the employer knows who you are and how to contact you. Secondly, we've got the profile. The idea behind this is to introduce the rest of the CV. Then after that comes a list of skills that are relevant to the job, and then the rest of the CV, the employment, the education, and the interests, is about proving that you've got those skills. Right, so let's start with the personal details. There's 3 key things that you need here. 1, your name. 2, your mobile number, and 3, your email address. But please make sure that your email address is sensible.
Sorry, Steve, I'm just taking some notes and I was thinking, wouldn't it be better if I added my date of birth? Or what about a profile picture as well? Wouldn't that be better?
These are good questions, but one of the key things to bear in mind is the more information you put on a CV, i.e. personal information, the more likely you are to have your identity stolen. And the other thing to think about is, if you say includes a photograph, somebody might take a shine to your picture, and then they've got your address, they've got your email, they might ask you out for a date and things like that, and it could get a bit messy. But the other thing, sometimes an employer might get swamped with loads of applications. If, for example, you put your address, they might be thinking who's local, who's not, and if you happen to be a bit further away than the other candidates, you might be put in the no pile just because you live a little bit further away. So the second part of the CV is the profile. This is really important because it introduces the rest of the CV. Now, I liken it to the blurb that you get on the back of a book. So you're not going to stand in a shop and read the whole of this book to decide whether or not you like it. You're going to read the blurb on the back and make a decision. So rather than write a generic profile that reads, I'm an honest, reliable, hardworking individual, great team player and all that jazz, you want to make it targeted to the audience, i.e. the employer. So I came up with a 5-point plan to help you write a targeted profile. So with this 5-point plan, you've got experience, core qualification, a couple of skills, a unique selling point or an achievement, and the reason for applying. The experience could be divided into 3, job or transferable skill, the number of years of experience and the type of experience. So very quickly, somebody who's worked in retail might have done so for 7 years and they've worked in pet aquatics, for example. So the next thing to include is the core qualification. Now, it doesn't need to be a literal qualification. It could be, for example, an MVQ in customer service. But for, say, a job on a construction site, do you need a customer service MVQ? Do you need GCSEs in maths and English? But definitely you're going to need a CSCS card, so that would be your core qualification. The third thing to include is a couple of skills. So on that score, you're thinking, what are my top 2 skills in relation to this job, and sticking them in the profile. After that, you're looking at the USP or unique selling point or an achievement.
Sorry to interrupt you, Steve, but what is a USP?
That's a really good question. The easiest way of explaining a unique selling point is by giving an example. So ask yourself, are you first aid trained? Because not everybody in the UK would be. In fact, if you were looking at a general workplace, there might be 1, 2, 3 people first aid trained. Equally, if you can speak different languages, how many people in the UK can speak different languages other than English? Thinking about the retail example, you think of Ashford International, you think of Blue Water, both of those have high tourist footfall. The language skills are going to be really important. And then last but not least, letting them know why you're sending in your CV in the first place. So it could be that you've recently left school and you're looking for an apprenticeship, or you've been a full-time parent for a couple of years and you're looking for part-time work, or that you're looking for a new challenge, something along those lines. But that's easy for me to say. Let's have a look at an example. So what we have here are the 5 headings. You make notes alongside those 5 headings to suit the actual job role you're going for. You then lose the 5 headings and then you flesh it out into the profile you see before you. So the next section is the skills. Here you need to make sure they're relevant to the job. Easy way of doing that is check the job spec, but not all job specs are that good. So with that in mind, check out the National Career Service website, because on our website we have over 800 different career options with full profiles, and these profiles include a list of all the skills that are likely to be needed for the job role. You can then use that as a point of reference and then think about which ones do I feel comfortable putting on my CV, and then wording them in your own words. But also be dynamic. So for example, are you just organised, highly organised, well organised, got excellent organisational skills? Think positively. Last but not least on this, remember to bullet point them, because you don't want everything to be a paragraphs or sets of paragraphs because it look like an essay. Equally, you don't want everything bullet pointed because it look messy, so break it up a little bit. And one other thing, or actually 2 other things. Sometimes you need to provide a bit more clarity with the skills that you're including. So for example, if you just put IT skills, I don't know whether you're proficient in Microsoft, whether you're a games designer, whether you're a techie, or whether you're a programmer. So on that score, you might need to provide a little bit more clarity, such as proficient in Microsoft Word and Excel. Equally, you might need to provide a little bit of evidence. It's all right saying you've got excellent sales ability, but if you can provide that little bit of evidence, and it doesn't need to be long-winded, then obviously that will add some clout. So now we move on to the next section, which is work history. Now in my experience, I would say over 90% of people include the job, where they did the work and the dates. I would then say over 85% include their responsibilities, but less than 3% include achievements. So what do we mean by achievements? Well, coming up on the screen is a list of about 7. First up, you've got promotions. That's a fairly obvious achievement, but not everybody goes for a promotion. The second one listed is additional responsibilities. So you might have been given key holder responsibilities, you might have been asked to be a fire marshal, a first aider, you might have even been asked to mentor or train a new member of staff. So another one could be positive feedback. So for example, say you work with a customer and you get a really nice email back, and in there that they've said, you've changed my life, then you would want to include that on your CV. So 4th on the list is on-the-job training. You don't need to obviously include every bit of training you've done on the job, but maybe just highlight a couple of key bits of training that you've done that you think the employer is going to be interested in. Key here though is it demonstrates your willingness to learn. Number 5 on the list is meeting deadlines or exceeding targets. We do live in a world where it's dominated by, in the workplace, targets, deadlines, etc. So if you can demonstrate that in your CV, then great. Number 6 on the list is awards or rewards or bonuses, for want of a better way of putting it. So people do get awards like Employee of the Month or Employee of the Year, so that could go on obviously on the CV. But equally, they might get bonuses attached to working towards targets or exceeding them. And finally, and this is a really good one, is if you've ever thought of a good idea that's improved efficiency, profit, customer service, add that into your CV as well. Quick example, one young lady said to her boss, "We're struggling to find the car parts in this warehouse, can I rejig it and colour coordinate it?" He was a bit sceptical, but he thought, well, let's give it a go. Guess what? After she rejigged it and colour coordinated it, staff were able to find the products a lot quicker, customers were a lot happier, and that had a knock-on effect with the profit. So we've looked at how to enhance your employment history by adding in achievements. But now we're looking at the scenario of chunking. This is where somebody might have done the same job but with lots of different companies. So here we have the same job but with 4 different companies and 4 similar sets of responsibilities. Rather than setting out like that, you could chunk it as per the example on the screen. And once you've got rid of the excess responsibilities, you then free up space to add in your achievements.
Sorry Steve, me again. What about if I've got multiple jobs but they've all been with the same company?
So that's a really good question. And what you can do is apply the same chunking process, but in a slightly different way. So you start off with the employer, you then list off the different roles as per the example coming up on the screen, and then you would include your achievements, which would include things like getting promoted, obviously, and any others. And then you could zone in on the manager supervisor responsibilities, and then follow that up with another section on retail assistant responsibilities.
Wow, Steve, thanks. It's been really useful information. I've taken a lot of notes. I'm so glad I called 0800 100 900 to talk to a National Careers Service advisor. If any of my friends ever need careers advice, I will definitely direct them to the National Careers Service website, because not only can you call, but there's also loads of other ways that you can get in touch with an advisor on their contact details too. Anyways, sorry for interrupting you, Steve. Please do carry on.
So next up we have the education and training. Here you would include any qualifications you've got, so that might be GCSEs, MVQs, A-levels, degrees, etc. Aside from that, you've also got certificates. Quite a lot of people sometimes leave the certificate off, especially if it's recently ran out. Now we use the example of a first aid certificate. That has a shelf life. When it runs out, it can be refreshed quite quickly, i.e. a one-day course. That is quicker than doing the full course. And then last but not least, we have professional development. Don't forget this, because it can be really important. For example, you're not going to get an MVQ in till training. You might get a certificate in it, chances are you won't, but it's still relevant, especially if you're going to go for a retail role. So the only other things to bear in mind are dates. So you could include the dates for your education and training, especially if you're young and you've not got a lot of work history behind you. It would help explain that. But equally, if you're a bit older and you say did O-levels, that could give away your age, because O-levels disappeared in the 80s. In that instance, you might want to leave the date off and just put GCSE equivalent qualifications. Oh, and don't forget, you don't have to include where you studied your qualifications at. Again, sometimes that can go for you, but equally it might not, depending whether the school you went to had a good rep. The next section is the interests. You don't have to include these, but they can be beneficial. It could prove that you've got certain skills that are relevant to the job role. For example, you might regularly go down the gym pumping iron, and that could be useful for working on a construction site. Key message here, don't lie. One young lady did and said she was an avid reader because she thought it would make her sound more intelligent. So the employer said to her, "Ooh, I notice you like reading. Who's your favourite author?" Her reply, "What's an author?" And then we come to things that maybe you might want to avoid. So certain words like socialising and gaming. There's nothing wrong in these, but sometimes it can conjure up a negative image in the employer's mind. So with socialising, are you the office chitter-chatter box, not doing any work and distracting others from theirs, or you do the sort of person that goes out on the razzle, has a heavy weekend and comes into work on a Monday with a honky-wonky hangover. Lastly, we come to the controversial topics. Dare I mention Brexit? Anyway, joking aside, politics, religion, football, animal rights, hunting, these are topics that you might not consider particularly controversial, but other people certainly would. I've got a really good example of a gentleman that went for an interview, which was arranged by a recruitment agent, and he had on his CV that he liked hunting game, and when he got to the interview and he was sitting in the reception area, there was animal rights posters all around the room. So, pardon the pun, game over. So then we come to the last section, which is references. You have three options here. One, don't bother including them because the employer will expect you to provide some anyway. Two, include the actual details of the referee, but check with them what details they're happy to include. And then number three, references available on request. That's a good one because you're letting the employee know you've got them in hand, but if they want the details, just ask. Who can be a reference? Well, it could be an employer reference, an education training reference, or a character reference. If it's an employer, will it be the boss, Maybe, but maybe not. It depends on whether there's other colleagues who you have more dealings with, such as a line manager who knows you better. With the education reference, that makes sense, especially if you're fresh out of school or college and you haven't had a lot of work history. And then you've got the character reference. Obviously, you're not going to ask your mum to provide that reference because she's hopefully going to say glowing things about you, but you would ask somebody that knows you well. So you might belong to, say, your local cricket club or something like that and been with them for the past 5-7 years. Everybody there knows you well, so they can provide that character reference. The other thing to think about is if you're self-employed, who is your reference then? You can't give yourself a reference, but don't forget, whoever you've worked for is your boss. So for example, my wife's a hairdresser, she's got regular customers, and any one of those could be a referee because they know her well and used her services for the past 4 or 5 years. But whatever referee you do choose, make sure it's someone who will give you a very, very good reference. So we've given you an overview of how to make a really good CV, but we have some bonus tips. Based on research, these are the top 5 CV mistakes to avoid. At number 5, too long, too short. So what's too long? Well, I saw a 10-page CV. That's my record so far. Nobody's going to read that. You're looking at 1 or 2 pages max. And at number 4, visually unappealing and difficult to read. So avoid lots of different font sizes and styles, pictures, things like that. At number 3, not tailoring your CV to match the job spec. This is why we introduce you to the 5-point plan in the profile section, found in the timestamp below. So at number 2, we have listing duties instead of individual achievements, which is why we introduce you to 7 potential achievements as found in the employment stamp below. So at number 1, the thing that employees found most frustrating was typing errors, poor spelling and grammar. So make sure you spell grammar check, but also get a second pair of eyes to look at your CV. Because remember, I was the second pair of eyes that spotted clam under pressure, and another wrote that they worked in cod storage.